The Thorn and the Flame extended version. In a forgotten valley between jagged mountains, where even the wind hesitated to linger, there lived a creature feared by all who knew its name, the predator dragon Virak. The valley itself seemed to exist outside the world of ordinary men. Its cliffs rose like broken teeth against the sky, their edges sharp and unforgiving. Shadows clung to every crevice, and the sun, though bright above, seemed reluctant to fully claim the land below. Even the birds avoided flying over it. Those that strayed too close often vanished without a sound, as if the sky itself swallowed them. The villagers who lived beyond the mountains spoke of the valley in hushed tones. They called it the Ash Hollow. No crops grew near its borders, no animals grazed there. And on certain nights when the wind blew from the east, a deep, distant roar would echo through the hills, low, thunderous, and filled with something that made even the bravest men close their doors and whisper prayers. That sound belonged to Virek. He was older than any story told about him, older than the crumbling ruins scattered across the mountain passes. His scales shimmered like molten iron, dark and gleaming, as if they held fire beneath their surface. His wings, vast and tattered at the edges, could cast shadows large enough to swallow entire fields. And his eyes burned like twin embers, glowing with an intelligence that few dared to imagine. He was not simply a beast. He was a force. And for years uncounted, he ruled the valley alone. Villagers whispered stories of his hunger and wrath. They spoke of livestock carried off in the night, of distant forests burned to cinders, of travelers who never returned. Whether the stories were truth or fear twisted into legend, none could say for certain. But one thing was undeniable. No one who valued their life went near the dragon's domain. Parents warned their children from a young age. Do not wander beyond the hills, they would say. Do not follow strange sounds, and never under any circumstance go toward the valley. Most children listened. But one did not. Her name was Lyra. She was small for her age, with soft, dark hair that fell unevenly around her shoulders and eyes that seemed too large for her face, eyes that watched the world with quiet curiosity. She was not fearless in the way some children were, rushing headlong into danger without thought. Instead, her lack of fear came from something deeper. She simply did not see the world the same way others did. Where others saw darkness, she saw mystery. Where others saw danger, she saw something waiting to be understood. She listened more than she spoke, often sitting alone beneath the shade of old trees, watching the way the wind moved through the leaves or how ants carried fragments of food far larger than themselves. The villagers often said she was strange, but never in a cruel way. There was a gentleness about her, something that made even the harshest voices soften when speaking her name. Still, she had been told the same warnings as every other child. She simply never truly believed them. The day everything changed began like any other. The sky was pale blue, streaked with thin clouds drifting lazily across the horizon. The air carried the warmth of the afternoon sun, and the distant sound of livestock and chatter filled the village. Lyra had wandered beyond the fields, as she often did, following the narrow paths that wound through the hills. She had no destination in mind. She rarely did. Instead, she followed whatever caught her attention: the glint of light on water, the movement of a distant bird, or the faint rustle of something unseen. That day it was a sound. At first, it was so faint she thought she imagined it. A low, distant rumble. She paused, tilting her head slightly. There it was again. Not loud, not threatening, but wrongs. It wasn't the roar of an animal defending its territory or the call of something hunting. There was no sharpness to it, no edge of aggression. It sounded strained, like something in pain. Lyra frowned, her curiosity stirring. The sound came again, slightly clearer this time, carried on the wind. And without realizing it, she began to follow it. The path grew narrower as she walked, the grass thinning beneath her feet. The familiar sights of the village faded behind her, replaced by rocky ground and scattered stones. The air grew cooler and the wind shifted, carrying with it a faint scent of smoke. She hesitated then. Some small part of her mind recognized that she had come too far. But the sound came again, low, aching, and filled with something that tugged at her heart. She took another step. Then another. The hills gave way to the edge of the valley. From above, the ash hollow stretched out like a scar in the land, its depths shadowed and silent. The rocks here were darker, streaked with black as if they had been burned long ago. No plants grew here, no insects buzzed. Even the wind seemed to move more slowly, as if weighed down by something unseen. Lyra stood at the edge, her small form dwarfed by the vast emptiness before her. This was the place she had been warned about. This was where the dragon lived. She should have turned back. Any sensible person would have. But the sound came again, closer now, and unmistakably filled with pain. Lyra took a breath and stepped into the valley. The world seemed to change the moment she crossed the boundary. The air felt heavier, thicker, as if every step required more effort than the last. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant rumble she had been following. Her footsteps echoed faintly against the stone, each one sounding louder than it should. She moved slowly, carefully, her eyes scanning the shadows. The sound grew stronger, guiding her, leading her deeper into the dragon's domain. At last she saw him. Hidden beneath a rocky overhang, partially shielded from view, lay a shape so massive it seemed part of the mountain itself. At first, her mind struggled to understand what she was seeing. Then it shifted and became clear. Vyrek. He lay curled upon himself, his great body coiled tightly as if trying to contain something within. His wings were folded, their edges dragging along the ground. His scales, dark and metallic, caught what little light reached the hollow, reflecting it in dull, flickering glints. He was still, but not at rest. His body trembled. Each breath he took was uneven, accompanied by a faint hiss of smoke escaping his nostrils. The ground beneath him was scorched in places, as if his own breath had burned the earth. Lyra froze. Every story she had ever heard rushed into her mind at once. The danger, the fire, the death. Her heart began to pound, loud enough that she was certain he would hear it. And then, his eyes opened. Two glowing embers in the dark. They locked onto her instantly. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The air tightened. The silence sharpened. The dragon's gaze was overwhelming, ancient, powerful, and utterly aware. It was the gaze of something that had lived far longer than any human, something that had seen countless seasons rise and fall. Something that did not need to hesitate. A thin stream of smoke curled from his nostrils. Lyra couldn't move. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee, to survive. But she didn't. Because in that moment, she saw something no one else had ever taken the time to notice. Pain, not anger, not hunger, pain. Her eyes shifted slightly, following the line of his snout. And then she saw it. A long, cruel thorn, thick as her finger, lodged deep into the flesh just above his nostril. The skin around it was inflamed, darkened, and cracked. Each breath he took seemed to push against it, causing a fresh wave of discomfort. That was the sound she had heard. Not a roar, a suffering. The dragon growled. A deep, rumbling warning that vibrated through the ground. Lyra flinched, but she did not step back. Instead, she took a single, careful step forward. The growl deepened. A warning, a promise. One more step and it would act. She stopped. Her hands trembled at her sides, her breath shallow. "I won't hurt you," she whispered. Her voice was soft, so soft it seemed impossible that something so small could exist in the presence of something so vast. The dragon's eyes narrowed. The faint glow in his throat flickered. Fire, ready, waiting, but he did not strike. Something in her voice, something quiet, steady, and without fear, held him in place. Slowly, Lyra lifted her hand. Every movement was deliberate, careful, giving the dragon time to react. To stop her, to end it. She stepped closer, and closer, until she stood within reach. The heat from his body washed over her, warm and intense. The scent of smoke filled her lungs, sharp and heavy. She could feel the power in him coiled just beneath the surface, ready to unleash at any moment. Her hand hovered inches from his snout. She hesitated, not from fear of him, but fear of hurting him. Then gently she touched the thorn. The dragon tensed. A low, dangerous rumble built in his chest. Lyra swallowed and grasped it. It was thicker than she expected, rough and embedded deep. She could feel the resistance immediately. This would hurt. "I'm sorry," she whispered. And she pulled. For a moment, nothing happened. The thorn refused to move. The dragon's body stiffened, the rumble growing louder, turning into something far more dangerous. Fire flickered behind his teeth. The ground trembled. Lyra tightened her grip. and pulled harder. Then, it came free. The sudden release sent her stumbling backward, the thorn falling from her hand as she lost her balance. For a heartbeat there was silence. Then the dragon roared. The sound exploded from him, shaking the valley, echoing against the mountains with overwhelming force. Lyra covered her ears, her heart racing. This was it. She had hurt him. He would destroy her. But the roar did not carry anger. It carried relief. The tension in his body melted away. The tremors stopped. The smoke that had once escaped in strained bursts now flowed steadily, calm and controlled. The pain was gone. Lyra slowly lowered her hands. The dragon's head moved. Lowering, closer, she froze. His massive eye filled her vision, glowing softly now, no longer sharp with pain or fury. He studied her, not as prey, not as a threat, but as something new, something he did not understand. For the first time in his long, fearsome life, someone had not feared him. Someone had helped him. And in that quiet, fragile moment, something ancient and powerful shifted within the heart of the predator. The bond forged in silence extended version. The valley changed after that day. It was not a change that could be measured in stone or soil, nor one that could be seen at a glance by those who feared its depths and dared not enter. It was quieter than that, subtle, like the shifting of wind before a storm or the moment between breath and speech. Yet for those who listened closely, the difference was undeniable. Where once the skis trembled at the dragon's passing, now they seemed to hold their breath in quiet watchfulness. The ash hollow no longer echoed with roars of hunger. The fires that once marked the dragon's wrath no longer scarred the edges of the valley. Instead, there was stillness. A watchful, waiting stillness. And at the heart of it all remained Virak. The predator who had once ruled through fear now lingered near the rocky ridge where Lyra often wandered. It was not a place he had favored before. In earlier days, he had kept to the deeper parts of the valley where shadows were thick and the world felt distant and small beneath his wings. But now he stayed closer to the edge. Closer to her. The first time Lyra returned, it was not with the same unthinking curiosity that had led her there before. The memory of that day lingered in her mind, the weight of his gaze, the heat of his breath, the thunder of his roar. She had helped him, but that did not mean he would not harm her. Kindness did not always change the nature of things. She knew that, and yet, she came back. The path felt longer this time, each step filled with quiet hesitation. The hills seemed steeper, the air heavier. The valley's edge loomed before her, just as it had before, dark and silent and filled with everything she had been warned about. She paused there, her fingers curling slightly at her sides. She could turn back. No one would know she had come this far. No one would expect her to return. But something deeper than fear guided her. Not curiosity this time. Something steadier. Something stronger. She stepped forward. The valley greeted her with the same heavy silence, but it no longer felt as suffocating as before. Or perhaps she had simply changed. Her eyes searched the rocky terrain, her heart beating faster with each step. For a moment, she saw nothing. Then, movement. A shadow shifted against the stone. Virak. He was there, perched upon a ridge, his massive form outlined against the pale sky. His wings were folded tightly against his body, his long tail coiled beside him. He had seen her long before she saw him. He always would. His eyes were fixed on her. Watching, measuring, waiting. Lyra stopped. The distance between them felt vast, though it was only a few dozen steps. The air seemed to tighten, the silence stretching thin as a thread. This moment mattered. She could feel it. Slowly, carefully, she lowered the small clay bowl she had been carrying. Water. It seemed foolish now, standing before a creature that could summon fire with a breath, but it was all she had thought to bring. She set it on the ground and stepped back. I brought this, she said quietly. Her voice carried only a short distance before being swallowed by the valley. The dragon did not move. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then with slow, deliberate motion, Virak shifted. He rose to his full height, his wings flexing slightly, catching the light in dull, metallic glints. The ground seemed to respond to his movement, small stones shifting beneath his weight. Lyra held her breaths. But he did not approach. Instead, he lowered his head slightly, his gaze still fixed on her. Curious. Not hostile. Not yet. She waited. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Neither moved. At last, Lyra took a step back. Then another. I'll come again, she said softly. And she turned. She walked away slowly at first, resisting the urge to run. Only when the valley began to recede behind her did she allow herself to breathe again. Behind her unseen, the dragon remained where he was. Watching. Long after she was gone. Days turned into weeks. And Lyra returned. Again and again. At first, she kept her distance. She would leave small offerings, water, bits of fruit, smooth stones she found along the paths. She knew the dragon did not need such things, but it was not about need. It was about trust. Virak never touched the offerings. Not once. But he always watched. Sometimes from the ridge. Sometimes from the shadows. Sometimes so close she could feel the warmth of him without seeing him at all. He was always aware of her. And she of him. The distance between them slowly began to shrink. One day she sat, not far from where she had placed her offering. She did not look at him, did not call out. She simply sat and spoke. At first her words felt small, fragile against the vast silence of the valley. She spoke of the wind, how it had been strong that morning, bending the tall grasses near the village. She spoke of the clouds, how they had drifted in long, thin lines across the sky. She spoke of things that did not matter. And yet she spoke. The dragon listened. He did not respond, did not move, but he listened. Days passed, then more, and slowly something began to change. The distance closed, not all at once, not in a single moment, but little by little, until one day she sat close enough to see the fine details of his scales, the way they overlapped, the faint lines etched into them like the rings of ancient trees. She could see the slow rise and fall of his breathing, steady and calm. She could feel the warmth of him, and she was no longer afraid. Virak did not speak, but he did not leave. And that was enough. Seasons began to shift. The air grew cooler, the light softer as the days shortened. The valley, once harsh and unchanging, seemed almost peaceful. The dragon no longer hunted near the villages. The livestock remained untouched. The fires that once lit the distant hills no longer burned. At first, the villagers did not notice. Then they began to whisper. The dragon had grown quiet. Too quiet. Some said he was weakening. Others said he was waiting. None guessed the truth. None could imagine it. Only Lyra knew. And she told no one. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the quiet of the valley was broken. Lyra felt it before she saw it. A shift in the air. A tension that did not belong. She paused mid-step, her gaze lifting toward the far edge of the valley. Movement. Not the slow, deliberate movement of the dragon. Something quicker. Sharper. She frowned, her heart beginning to race. Then she saw them. Figures. Several of them. Moving carefully along the rocks, their forms partially hidden by shadow. They wore armor that caught the fading light in dull flashes, and in their hands were long spears tipped with iron. Hunters. They moved with purpose, their steps measured, their eyes fixed on the valley's depths. They had come for him. The stories had spread. Of treasure. Of glories. Of the great dragons who no longer roared. They believed him weakened. Vulnerable. They did not understand. Lyra's breath caught. Without thinking, she turned and ran. The ground blurred beneath her feet as she raced toward the ridge where Virak rested. Her heart pounded in her chest, louder than her footsteps, louder than her thoughts. She found him where she expected, lying beneath the fatting sun, his massive body still, his wings folded. For a moment he looked almost peaceful. Virak, she whispered urgently. His eyes opened instantly. They're coming. That was all she needed to say. The dragon rose. And the world changed. The stillness shattered. The quiet, watchful presence she had come to know vanished, replaced by something far older, far more dangerous. The predator. His body tensed, muscles coiling beneath his scales. Smoke began to curl from his nostrils, thin at first, then thicker, darker. Fire gathered within him. Not the uncontrolled, pained burst she had seen before. This was different. Focused. Intentional. Deadly. Lyra stepped back, her breath catching. She had never seen him like this. Not truly. This was what the world feared. And now it was awake. The hunters emerged from the shadows, their formation tightening as they approached. They saw him immediately, their expressions hardening, their grips tightening on their weapons. Then they saw her. A child. Standing beside the dragon. Confusion flickered across their faces. "Stay back," Lyra cried, stepping forward. She placed herself between them and the dragon. The hunters hesitated. "Move aside, girl," one of them shouted. But she did not move. And behind her, Virak remained still. Waiting, watching, until one of the hunters threw his spear. Time slowed. Lyra saw it coming, the sharp tip glinting in the dying light as it cut through the air toward her. She did not move. She did not have time. But the dragon did. In a single explosive motion, Virak moved. The ground shook beneath the force of it, his wings snapping open with a thunderous crack. His roar tore through the valley, louder than anything Lyra had ever heard, shaking the very air around them. And then, fire. It erupted from him in a blazing arc, not directed at the girl but over her, around her, forming a wall of searing heat between her and the hunters. The spear never reached her. It fell blackened to the ground. The hunters staggered back, their formation breaking as the heat washed over them. Fear replaced determination. They had come for a beast. They had found something far worse. The dragon advanced, each step deliberate, each movement filled with restrained fury. His eyes burned brighter than ever, his presence overwhelming. The ground trembled beneath him. The air itself seemed to recoil. He did not need to strike. He did not need to kill. The message was clear. Live, or be destroyed. The hunters broke. One by one, then all at once, they turned and fled, their courage burned away, their weapons abandoned as they scrambled back toward the mountains. The valley fell silent once more. Only the faint crackle of lingering heat remained. Lyra stood still, her breath uneven, her heart racing. Slowly she turned. Virak stood behind her, his wings still spread wide, his massive form casting a shadow over her. His eyes still burned, but not with rage, with something else. Something steady, something certain. Protection. He had chosen. Not instinct, not hunger, not dominance. Choice. The predator had become a guardian. And from that day forward, the valley was no longer a place of fear. It was watched, protected, and the girl who had once been nothing more than a fragile human child now walked beneath the shadow of a creature no army dared to challenge. Not because he was feared, but because he had chosen something greater than fear. And that choice would change everything. The Guardian of Flame and Heart extended version. Years passed and the story spread beyond the mountains. At first, it was nothing more than a rumor carried by travelers, half-whispered, half-dismissed. Tales of a valley once feared, now strangely silent, of a dragon who no longer hunted, of a child who had walked into death and returned untouched. Stories like these were common in distant lands, shaped by fear, exaggerated by imagination, and often forgotten as quickly as they were told. But this one did not fade. It grew. It traveled from village to village, carried by merchants, hunters, wanderers, and those who claimed to have seen it with their own eyes. Each telling added new details, new embellishments, until the truth became wrapped in layers of legend. Some said the girl had been chosen by the dragon. Others claimed she had bewitched it. Some insisted the creature was no longer a dragon at all, but a spirit bound to her will. And others, those who listened more carefully, said something simpler. That she had shown kindness where no one else had. And the dragon had remembered. People spoke of the girl who walked with a dragon, the child who had tamed a predator not with chains but with compassion. Some called her foolish, others called her blessed, but none dared to test the truths. Because even those who doubted the story agreed on one thing. No one who had seen the dragon up close had ever returned unchanged. Lyra grew as all children do. The years softened the sharp edges of childhood, shaping her into something quieter, steadier. Her small frame lengthened, her movements became more deliberate, and her eyes, those same watchful eyes, held a deeper understanding of the world. But she never lost the quiet courage that had led her into the valley that day. She never forgot what she had seen, what she had felt, and what she had chosen. The village had changed around her, though not as dramatically as the valley. People watched her differently now, some with curiosity, others with unease, a few with quiet respect. But none with true understanding. They could not see what she saw. They could not feel the bond she carried. To them, the dragon was still a creature of fire and death. To her, he was something more. And Virak never left her side. Not in the way a shadow follows a body, always visible and close, but in the way something deeper remains present, even when unseen. When she walked the edges of the valley, he was there. When she climbed the hills, he circled above. When she stood beneath the open sky, she could feel him, watching, guarding, understanding. He became more than a presence. He became a constant, a force that watched over her and the lands beyond. Seasons turned. Storms came and went. And with each passing year, the bond between them grew stronger, not through words, not through commands, but through something far more enduring. Trust. When storms gathered, the sky darkening with heavy clouds, the people of the village would look toward the mountains. And they would see him. A vast shape moving through the storm, wings cutting through wind and rain, his presence breaking the force of the sky itself. Lightning would flash around him, illuminating his form in brief, blinding glimpses like something pulled from myth. The storms never lingered long after that. Whether by coincidence or something more, none could say. But the people noticed. And they remembered. When danger approached, wild beasts driven from distant lands or travelers with darker intentions, the dragon would appear. Not always with fires. Not always with violence. Often his presence alone was enough. A shadow passing overhead. A distant roar echoing through the hills. A warnings. And it was always heeded. Because no one wished to see what would happen if it was not. Yet for all that he was, for all that he did, their bond was never spoken. There were no commands given. No agreements made. No promises spoken aloud. Lyra never told him what to do. And he never needed to ask. There were no words between them. Only understanding. It lived in the spaces between their actions, in the quiet moments when nothing needed to be said, in the way he watched her and the way she trusted him without hesitation. It was not control. It was not ownership. It was something far rarer. Something freely given. Winter came slowly that year. At first, it was nothing more than a chill in the air, a thin frost clinging to the edges of morning. Then the winds grew sharper, the skis heavier, and snow began to fall in quiet, steady waves. The mountains turned white. The valley grew still. And for a time, it seemed the world had settled into peace. Until the darkness came. It did not arrive with thunder or fire. It came quietly, systematically. From beyond the far mountains, where the land stretched into kingdoms unknown to the villagers, an army began its march. They came with iron and discipline, their banners dark against the pale sky. They did not move like raiders or scattered bands of thieves. They moved as one organized, relentless, unstoppable. Village after village fell before them. Farms were burned. Homes reduced to ash. Those who resisted were crushed. Those who fled carried the stories forward. And fear spread faster than the army itself. By the time word reached Lyra's village, it was already too late to prepare. The people gathered, their voices tight with panic. What can we do? Where can we go? There's nowhere left. They spoke of fleeing, of hiding, of surrender. But none of those choices offered hope. Because the army did not stop. And it did not forgive. At last the whispers turned toward the mountains. Toward the valley. Toward the dragons. No one said it directly at first, but the thought was there. If the stories were true, if the dragon truly protected the land, then perhaps there was still a chance. Lyra stood at the edge of the valley, the cold wind pulling at her cloak. In the distance, beyond the hills, she could see it. Smoke, rising in dark columns against the pale sky. The villages were burning. The army was coming. Behind her, the valley lay silent. Waiting. She did not call out. She did not need to. A shadow moved above her. And then he was there. Vyrek landed beside her, his massive form settling against the frozen ground with a low, echoing weight. His wings folded slowly, his head turning toward the distant smoke. He understood. Of course he did. He had seen the signs long before the humans had. Lyra did not command him. She did not ask. She simply stepped forward. And he followed. The army reached the valley at dawn. They expected resistance, of course. But nothing they could not overcome. Another village. Another conquest. Another victory. They marched in formation, their armor gleaming, their weapons sharp and ready. Their leaders rode at the front, their expressions calm, confident. They had done this before. Many times. And they would do it again. Until the sky darkened. At first it was subtle. A shadow passing over the ground. Then it grew. Wider. Deeper. Until the sunlight itself seemed to vanish. The soldiers looked up. And saw him. A vast shape blotting out the sun. Wings stretched wide, cutting across the sky like living thunder. The dragon descended. His roar shattered the morning, echoing across the mountains, shaking the earth beneath their feet. It was not the roar of an animal. It was a declaration. A warning. A challenge. And behind him, standing at the edge of the valley, was Lyra. Unmoving. Unafraid. The army hesitated. For the first time since their march began. They hesitated. Then the dragon struck. Fire poured from him, not wild and uncontrolled, but precise, devastating. It swept across the ground before the army, forcing them back, breaking their formation. Panic spread. Commands were shouted. Orders were given. But the dragon was faster. Stronger. Untouchable. He moved through the battlefield like a force of nature, his wings stirring wind strong enough to throw soldiers from their feet, his fire cutting through their lines with unstoppable force. And yet, he did not strike without thought. He did not burn blindly. His fury was controlled, directed, each movement deliberate, each action chosen, not by instinct, but by purpose. The battle was swift. It could not have been anything else. An army could fight men. They could fight beasts. But they could not fight something like this. The invaders broke. Their confidence shattered. Their discipline lost. They fled, leaving behind weapons, armor, and the remnants of their ambition. The valley stood untouched, unconquered. When it was over, silence returned. The smoke cleared. The wind settled. And the people came. Slowly at first, then in greater numbers. They approached the valley with hesitation, fear still lingering in their steps. They had seen the battle. They had seen the dragon. And yet, they came. Lyra stood at the center of it all. Unharmed. Unshaken. Vyrek stood behind her, his presence vast and steady. The people looked at him. Really looked. Not through stories. Not through fear. But through what they had seen with their own eyes. He had not destroyed them. He had not hunted them. He had protected them. And something shifted. Not all at once, but enough. The fear did not vanish. It would never truly vanish. But it changed. It softened. And in its place, something new began to grow. Respect. Understanding. They no longer saw a monster. They saw a guardian. As the years turned, the valley became a place of peace. The mountains stood unchanged, their jagged peaks cutting into the sky as they always had. The wind still carried their quiet songs, and the seasons continued their endless cycle. But the valley was different. It was watched over, protected, not by fear, but by choice. Children no longer feared the sky. They looked up in wonder, hopping to catch a glimpse of the great dragon soaring above, his wings stretching across the horizon like something from a dream. They told stories of him, not of destruction but of protection, not of wrath but of loyalty. And always in those stories there was another figure. The girl who had walked into the valleys. The girl who had seen beyond fear. The girl who had changed everything. Lyra. And beside her always was the dragon. Because in a world ruled by strength and fear, it had not been power that changed the course of things. It had not been force. It had not been conquest. It had been something far quieter. A single act of kindness. A choice made in a moment when fear could have ruled. And from that choice, something extraordinary had been born. A bond stronger than fire. Stronger than fear. Stronger than anything the world had known. And even the fiercest predator could choose to protect instead of destroy.